A few days ago, I finally got my visa secured and bought a one-way ticket over to Asia to actually begin my journey of traveling the world with nothing but my camera. But there was one last trip that I really wanted to do before finally leaving the US for the first time. I was right in the middle of this long editing session when I got a call from a very dear friend of mine. Turns out she had just gotten a job as a bush pilot up in Alaska and needed me to drive her car all the way up there from Utah. This couldn't be more perfect. One last big photography trip before setting off on my journey to Asia. After hanging up the phone, I realized just what I had gotten myself into. It's more than 3,000 miles from Salt Lake City to Alaska, so I called an old friend of mine who I knew would be down for a long-ass road trip. The first thing that needed to be done was to organize the absolute chaos that is my camera equipment. Because we wouldn't have much space in the car, I had to pack really light and opted to bring my digital camera instead of all of my film equipment. I did make sure that we had enough room for fishing rods as well as my paraglider though. With the car packed and cameras loaded, we set out on the long drive north. Even though it would take us about 6 hours longer, we decided to drive through Banff instead of taking the more direct route. I've always wanted to see Banff, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. Growing up in Utah, I thought I knew what mountains were, but turns out what we have here in Utah really only count as small hills compared to the amazing mountains of Canada. We drove through the night and put a ton of miles behind us, so I didn't have a ton of time to actually shoot photos on the way, but the few that I was able to grab throughout Canada, I'm really happy with, and I think they came out great. By day 3, we had made it to the far north of Canada and entered the long dark of the Yukon. Driving through this place so far north during the long days of summer was an absolute trip. We drove with the sun sitting right on the horizon for what felt like forever. It seemed as if time had stopped and we were just traveling through the twilight zone. After meeting up with Desi in Anchorage, we dropped off our stuff and immediately made our way south down the Kenai River and out to Kane's Head. This is where I learned just how massive Alaska really is. We hiked for miles along the shore among towering pines and unbelievable peaks, finally coming to our campsite way out on the Seward Peninsula. I felt like I was in heaven. Everywhere I looked were big, towering mountains that honestly seemed like they came straight out of a postcard. I'm not sure if I really did the area justice with any of the photos I took, but I'm still incredibly happy with the images that we were able to make out there. Now, in all honesty, some of you might not care for this next part at all, but sometimes I do things other than photography on my trips. And being that I was in Alaska, it seemed like a sin not to try to do some flying while I was there. So we trekked up to the top of Point Hope for one of the best flights of my entire life. It was such an amazing opportunity to be able to fly from over 6,000 feet elevation all the way back down to sea level. This is a flight that I will remember for the rest of my life.
I know a place where we can go and be alone. So come away with me, nobody has to know.
The next day we decided it was time to fly something with an actual motor. So Desi took me up in her Cessna to do some aerial photography of the Knik Glacier. I've always wanted to photograph Alaska from the air, and I honestly can't tell you how grateful I am to have had the opportunity to tick this off my bucket list. The Knik Glacier and the surrounding mountains are undescribably beautiful. Flying in a small airplane through the mesmerizing mountains of Alaska and getting able to stick my camera out the window and photograph all of it is an experience that I don't even know how to describe. It was so much fun. I honestly could not keep the smile off my face the entire time. And it was freezing. Even though we were up there in the middle of June, every time we had the window open and I was sticking my camera out, my head out the window, I was just getting blasted with freezing glacier air. On our last day before heading out on our flight home, we spent the afternoon at Lake Eklutna, just wandering around and saying our goodbyes while staring at the unbelievable beauty of the natural world. Overall, the week-long trip up to Alaska, where we fished and biked and flew paragliders and airplanes, was one of the best trips I have ever taken in my life. And it's all thanks to the incredible people that I'm lucky enough to be able to call my friends. The thought that I'm leaving all of this behind fills me with both sadness and joy. Sadness for the amazing people I'm leaving behind, and joy for what the next few years will have to offer as I set off to the east to explore parts of the planet that are completely foreign and unknown to me. Thank you so much for tuning into this final episode of the Kevi Chronicles in America. Next time you see me, I'll be coming to you live from Asia.